Okay, hello everyone. My name is Rob Hanna, as I was introduced already, I guess. I'm certified senior instructor with British Columbia Snowmobile Federation. I'm also certified by Canadian Avalanche Association with operations level 1 avalanche specific to snowmobile. I started riding in 1972 as a child, and it's been my passion now for 40 years. And as owner-operator of BC Snowmobile, I've been teaching safe snowmobile practices professionally now for industry and recreation for 5 years. Customers, forest companies, environmental consultants, Parks Canada, research universities, communication and utility companies, Canadian Forces among others. As in other activities, snowmobile operation carries with it some inherent risks, and we want to talk today about some of those risks and how we can eliminate and minimize them. So anyway, we'll get on with it, and hopefully this prevents an accident one day, and if it does, then I've done my job. Hopefully it prevents many. So we're going to start off with something fairly dry, work safe BC regulations, which, you know, of course, if you're in the workplace, there are work regulations that you've got to follow. So operator training, you have to be trained thoroughly or properly in safe operation of vehicles that you're going to be using, be it ATVs or snowmobiles. So competency and testing of operators. A person must not operate mobile equipment unless the person, A, has received adequate instruction in the safe use of the equipment, B, has demonstrated to a qualified supervisor or instructor competency in operating the equipment, and D, is familiar with operating instructions for the equipment. So you can't just go out and jump on a forklift without learning how to operate it safely. And same with a snowmobile or an ATV or a table saw for that matter. So they're here for a reason. Operator's responsibility. So the operator of the mobile equipment must operate the equipment safely, maintain full control of the equipment, and comply with the laws governing that operation. Again, there's BC laws that we're going to get to next that regard the operation of snowmobiles. And a supervisor's responsibility. Supervisor must not knowingly operate or permit a worker to operate mobile equipment which is or could create an undue hazard to the health or safety of any person or is in violation of this regulation. So again, if a supervisor knows that someone's not trained properly and they operate equipment, it falls onto the supervisor also, not just the employee. So unattended equipment, if you leave your snowmobile or ATV or other equipment, you're supposed to leave it locked out, and in this case, with a snowmobile, if you're going to leave it somewhere, you probably want to have the brakes on and either have the key in your pocket or the DESS, which is similar to a key. It basically, so someone can't come along and get hurt by it. Boarding and leaving. Person must not board or leave any mobile equipment while it is in motion, except in an emergency. That's pretty much a no-brainer. You board something that's moving, it could cause injury. Operator's manual. So for an ATV or snowmobile, it's good to have your owner's manual, go through it, become familiar with it before you operate it. And, you know, from time to time you might have to consult it and forget how to operate something. And the operator must use the ATV or the snowmobile in accordance with the instructions. Different snowmobiles are used for different uses. So a mountain sled, you wouldn't load up with 300 pounds of tools, and a utility sled, you wouldn't be high marking. So Operating requirements, the start of the shift. This is a very important one. This could save your life. Operator must inspect the equipment before start of the operation of the shift, and thereafter is required to ensure the safe operating condition of the equipment. And we're going to get to this later, but a pre-ride inspection is really important. So we'll get to that a little later. Restricted asset access. Only authorized persons may be on the mobile equipment while the equipment is in motion. So even as a passenger, they should have some type of training, in case of an emergency and they have to get off the machine, they know the safe way how to do it. And next, the operator must report defects and conditions affecting the safe operation of the equipment to the supervisor or employer. Again, if you're out on the work site and let's say your machine rolls over and damages the kill switch or the brake lever or something like that, it's really important to report that so it can be repaired before it gets used again. Next person might get on after you go home and it's their turn to use it, and they find out that there's no brakes or something like that. So any repair or adjustment necessary for the safe operation must be made before the equipment is used. So WorkSafe has guidelines, and one of the guidelines you're probably familiar with is an emergency response plan. This goes for snowmobiles and ATVs also, and a written evacuation response plan. So one of the, let's say the emergency you had out in the field is one of the workers was injured. Do you have a response plan? How are you going to deal with that? Do you have necessary equipment like maybe a stretcher or a rescue sleigh? Do you have a first aid kit, which you should have? And again, written evacuation response plan. Do you have a way to get a seriously injured worker out of there? If you're in 15 or 20 miles into the bush in deep snow and the worker's unable to be doubled, that could be quite serious, especially in inclement weather where a helicopter couldn't fly. And again, you're in cold weather, so there's several more risks involved, like hypothermia, etc. So this must be available at home base and in the field. So each worker that's in the field should be familiar with this plan and probably have a copy of it with them. And then also at home office, again, a list so that they can check. So personal check system. This is required if a single machine or a single rider is going out, or if both operators or a group of operators is out and separated for any reason. So if a group is out and you get one person to go ahead and check if the trail is safe, they've either got to be in visual contact, radio contact, or at least be able to shout to each other. BC Motor Vehicle Act regulations. These are just like driving a car. There's laws that govern them. So 24-1 states that no one may drive a snowmobile on a highway in an unorganized area or in a municipality unless he or she is the holder of a permit that authorizes the operation subject to the limitations and conditions attached to it. So there is a permit that you can get from the local RCMP. It's free, and you go in there. You have to have liability insurance before you can get it, and it's available at any detachment. And what you would want to apply for is one for business use, and our personal ones we have 24 hours a day. Sometimes they'll want to give it to you for sun up to sundown. Well, if you're working, you can't always be out of there before sundown. So you can get that permit. And anyway, the next one, 24-01 or 02, that's the operating hours, etc. So the other laws, 24-022, certain equipment if night operation is authorized. The lights must be turned on. Every manufacturer now has daytime running lights, so this is a requirement now. There must be a headlight, must be high-low beam indicator, must be a tail lamp and brake lamp. And the next one, again, they all come with brakes, but they must be working, and a muffler that cools and quietens the exhaust. So the last one deals with obtaining the license and liability insurance. That's if you're going to be using it on a secondary road or an unmaintained road. So you might want to look into that if you have to use it in areas like that. So I guess we've all heard of accidents. Snowmobile operations have some inherent risks. They're high-powered pieces of machinery, so there's potential for accidents. Machine with many moving parts, and they're also prone to mechanical failures. They allow workers to access some very remote locations, and in turn, this can make rescue very difficult. There's exposure to severe weather and terrain hazards, some of which frozen bodies of water, drowning, avalanche burial, becoming stranded out there, injuries, hypothermia, frostbite, snowblind, starvation, and dehydration if you're stuck out there. So accidents, snowmobiling can be fun and exciting, and it usually is, but occasionally careless riding can lead to devastating accidents. So this is a USA stat, and over 100 people die each year in snowmobile-related accidents, and 13,000 are injured. Not as many in Canada because our population isn't as big. So 40% of all fatalities caused by snowmobile accidents occur from collisions with trees, fixed objects, people, or other vehicles. And the greatest risk factor in snowmobile accidents is inexperience. And I've seen this time and time again. Inexperienced riders are much more likely to travel at high speeds, in low visibility conditions, be it in inclement weather or night, fail to react to sudden obstacles in time, have collisions, flip a snowmobile, roll it over, or just break down. Hypothermia is a concern, especially some of your people that are in the northern end of the province. I think we're all familiar with that low body temperature. Eventually your body shuts down and you, if in severe cases, you can perish. Frostbite, this is actually more common than you'd think. I've had mild cases of it over the years when I used inferior clothing. So it's basically when you freeze the body tissue, and on a snowmobile it's quite common if you don't dress properly in really cold conditions. Sometimes your fingertips or your cheeks if you don't have proper clothing. It's something to look for and be aware of even in yourself. If your fingertips are starting to get really cold, stop. Put your hands in your armpits or, blow on them, warm them up before you start out again. Most snowmobiles now have bar warmers, handlebar warmers, so they don't always work in super cold weather.
Hey Rob, it's Gerard. Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question about that one last slide. The picture of the frostbitten thumb. Is that a snowmobile? And is that from you hanging onto the throttle?
Well, if what I find, especially with my Skidoo brand, like Bombardier snowmobiles, the thumb warmers on those, you almost always have on low because if it was on hot, it almost cooks your thumb. But yeah, that's a snowmobiler, and we had some very graphic, ugly photos, but they were really sickening and in severe cases. So I thought at least that gets someone's attention.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks.
So some of the treatments, until you can see a doctor, try and get the person into a warm place. You shouldn't walk on frostbitten feet if you can avoid it, because you can actually crack the tissue. That would be in a severe case. Don't rewarm the skin until you can keep it warm. So, if you've lost your gloves and you're going to have to keep your hands inside your jacket or in your partner's jacket, wrap them up with a pair of socks, whatever you've got to do. You want to gently warm the area with warm water, absolutely not hot water. Hot water can break your blood vessels when it thaws, so you want to slowly warm them. If you don't have water nearby, again, breathe on the area, or a good place is put them in your armpits. That gets a lot of your core temperature to them. And don't rub or massage the skin. Again, it can damage the tissue. So dehydration might sound kind of silly until you do a lot of snowmobiling. Then you'll understand you can work up a very powerful thirst. Quite often, especially on a deep powder day, you're getting stuck, you're working hard. Snowmobiling is not easy. It's physically demanding, and quite often people just don't bring enough fluids with them. And again, you're dressed in heavy clothing. So dress in layers, and quite often I get 10 minutes from the truck, stop, peel off a layer, throw it into my backpack. But just be aware of it. It's better to take out a few extra bottles of water or liquids, and you can always bring them back. So drowning, that's kind of odd, but this is by far the #1 cause of snowmobile deaths. This is actually pictures of a rescue we did about three or 4 years ago. And if you look at the lake where it's untracked, that's what a guy and his son saw. And we've actually ridden on this little lake for, one of my first time snowmobiling ever when I was a kid was out on this lake, and we used to go up there quite often. But it's usually about a foot thick, very safe. This was at the beginning of the season, and the fella and his son went up there, went out onto the lake thinking, oh, great, beautiful day. The father went through, and of course the son panicked, slowed down. He should have just pinned it and went to the other side where we're standing on the other side. And anyway, the son ended up going through too, so they're both wet up to their chest. They managed to pull themselves up on the ice and claw themselves over to the far side and walk around. It's a very small lake, so they walked around, threw away their helmets, threw away their gloves. They were soaked. They didn't have any matches or any safety gear at all with them, not in their pockets. So they were stuck. Luckily, they had told the mother that they were going to be back at 6 o'clock. So this was about 3 in the afternoon. And they started walking down toward the truck. 6 o'clock rolled around. Mom was pretty worried, so she phoned a couple of the people in the local snowmobile club, and they found them walking. And they were pretty cold, but it all turned out good. So this is 2 days later. We went up to rescue the snowmobiles, and the top picture is just where we're standing on the lake on the other side, about 50 feet from the shore. And the fellow that owned the sleds went and bought a brand new chainsaw winch for about $1,800. And a group of us went up and pulled the sleds out. We couldn't get them running at the time, but ended up getting them out of there. And the next day, you got them running and stuff. But it could have been fatal for both of them. So if you have any doubts about ice thickness, don't take a chance. And Canada has the exact same measurements here for safe ice thicknesses. Personally, I like to double these, and because quite often you don't find clear ice in I don't know, in Canada, maybe up north it's a little different, but on the coast here, quite often we get ice that's not super strong, so I like to double this. And again, if you've got any doubts, why even take a chance of going there? We'll get to it later, some of the gear that is available. You can buy floater suits, or Mustang makes inflatable emergency ones. So working on frozen bodies of water, we've done courses for Environment Canada and places like that where they're checking ice thicknesses, water quality, things like that. So if you're working on frozen bodies of water, you need to wear either a floater suit, carry ice pick. Those are available also. They go around your wrist for riding, and then if something bad happens, they're right there ready for you to use. Even a set of keys in your pocket will help you, get some traction and help pull yourself out. So you'd want to make yourself as big as possible, kind of sprawl yourself out and try and pull yourself up on the ice. If you go through, your suit will keep you afloat for a minute, even a non-buoyant one, and the helmet may or may not help you. They do have foam in them, but it's also on your head. So, like I said, slide back onto the ice, making yourself basically sprawl out, spread eagle, so that you can spread your weight out, as not to break the ice. Kick your feet, just like a seal or a sea lion. If the ice keeps breaking, just keep trying that. Move towards shore if you can. If your buddy is nearby, maybe he can throw you a line or something. Don't remove your gloves, because it's going to be a lot harder to get out unless you're trying to get to your keys or something. Once onto the ice, roll from the area, and don't stand up until you're well away from the hole, because again, that small surface area of just your feet, you can plunge right through again. So avalanche training, pretty important. If you're in avalanche training, then definitely you should have some form of avalanche training. It's unlike cross-country skiing or snowshoeing. A snowmobile is hypermobile. You can quickly travel through many avalanche-prone areas in a day, and basic safe practices group up in safe areas only. So if you're at the bottom of a hill that has had avalanches before, or you even suspect it, you don't want to sit there and look at it. You want to go to the next safe area, which may be a big clump of trees, and you're a lot safer there. Spread out. So if you do have to travel through one of those areas, you want to go one by one and then stop in the safe area, wait for your buddy. And again, you may have to leapfrog through several areas like that during the day. So only one person is in that danger zone at a time. If something bad happens, you've still got people that are able to rescue them if it's safe. So wear your avalanche beacon on your body, under your jacket. Don't put it in your pack, and don't put it on your sled. But just like at the bottom here, your coworker wants to find you, not your backpack or your sled. And quite often, your backpack will be torn off you in a violent avalanche. So that's very, very important. And make sure the batteries are good before you go. So teaching safe avalanche skills is beyond the scope of this webinar course. I strongly encourage everyone who goes into avalanche area to please take an AST1 course, and they're available through some of the snowmobile clubs, or Canadian Avalanche Association can give you a list of instructors in your area. So, whether you're riding, sliding for business or pleasure, get the knowledge, get the skills, and live to ride another day. One of the things you'd never do is get in a boat alone, go to a remote cove, don your dive gear, and dive with no training, and do whatever task was needed. would be dangerous and irresponsible. So it's quite the same to get on a high-powered and technically challenged snowmobile and ride into a remote wilderness area, passing through many hazardous terrain features on the way. And yeah, it's not a lot different. So how do we reduce the risk? Safety training courses, local snowmobile clubs even, you can get a lot of good pointers. Snowmobile buddies, avalanche skills training. It's all out there available. So we touched on this earlier, design an emergency response plan. Again, in workplaces, they usually have similar types of plans in mills, in industrial plants. It's becoming the norm now, and it's actually necessary. So it helps prepare for an emergency and aids in organizing rescue efforts. So record detailed information, where you're going, the trailhead location, type of vehicle, the participants info, how many people, what kind of equipment they have, a check-in time, employees' expected response to an emergency situation, etc. So employees are required to carry this into the field and also leave one at the home base. A copy of the ERP remains at your home base, and the person with whom you leave that with will play a critical role if something does go bad and you're overdue. So make sure the person you choose knows what to do, when to do it. If you've got a return time, maybe they wait an hour or half an hour. Well, you haven't checked in, so get the ball rolling sooner rather than later. It could be something serious. This will likely be a search and rescue type scenario. In Canada, our government doesn't have very good resources for rescue in the winter. It's hard to believe a country like this, but most of the time it falls on volunteers, either search and rescue or snowmobile club members. So wherever there's RCMP office, there's usually close by a SAR coordinator, and a 911 call. If a 911 call is made from the field, indicate that you need the SAR person. We've had cases where RCMP has responded with not a very good response, just that, oh, we don't have a key for that gate, and it took a few calls to actually get the right person and get the ball rolling. So once the critical information is relayed, don't stay on your line if it's a cell phone. Conserve your battery power. Say that you'll check in again in half an hour or something. So trip pre-planning, it's really important. A few days before you're going to be going into the field, you should be monitoring weather conditions and, avalanche forecasts. Maybe make some inquiries. So past and present conditions. So the terrain, maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you're not, but try and find some information of what kind of terrain you'll be in. Make some calls and get online. Canada Avalanche Association at avalanche.ca, they've got avalanche bulletins, local weathers, and also maps available on their website. So it's a good resource. Local knowledge. So if you had to go to work in a new area, maybe timber cruising or whatever you're doing, surveying, a good idea is to get a hold of a local snowmobile club. They're usually more than happy to give whatever information they can give. And also, they may even get someone to come out with you to show you around a bit. So BCSF is a group in British Columbia, and also ABC Snow. Same thing, it's a group of snowmobile clubs. You can go online and find a local group that's close by. And other backcountry users. Maybe there's a hiking group or snowshoers, cross-country skiers, sometimes they're a good resource too. So this is probably one of the most critical things that leads to accidents, and it's rider decision-making, be it good or bad. So Backcountry Snowmobile works toward reducing the risks by instructing and encouraging students to develop safe riding skills and attitudes. So one of the techniques that we use is a system called SIPD, and the acronym sounds kind of funny, but basically you want to scan around you, ahead of you, and identify things that are going to be in your path, dangers, etc., just the terrain, and that way, you know, you want to look far ahead and just keep an eye on that. Don't look directly in front of your skis, because by the time you get there, if you look far ahead, you'll already have made a plan. You're going to predict what could happen, be it good or bad. Then you'll be able to decide whether to execute your decision. And, you know, quite often, like a bump in front of you, well, you probably want to go around it. It's no different than walking down the stairs. Well, you can fall down the stairs, so you're probably going to hold on to the handrail or, you know, walk slowly. So snowmobile operation, we just touched on this a little earlier. Every employee should be familiar with the basic controls and safety equipment on the snowmobile they'll be operating. If you have a different snowmobile this time, you probably want to review the owner's manual. If it's maybe a 4-stroke you're riding this time, it's going to react a little bit differently on throttle. You're not going to have to mix the gas or add oil to the oil reservoir. Throttle and kill switch on pretty much all the snowmobiles are going to be on the right handlebar. Some snowmobiles have a tether cord for an engine stop that you can attach to your clothing. Is it fuel injected or carbureted? There's still some carbureted machines out there. Most of them built now are fuel injected, which is really trouble-free, but also when you get stuck, if you've got to roll that machine over, they don't flood like the old carbureted ones, so that makes life a little easier. The brake is always on the left. Is there a reverse on your sled? If you've got an older sled, it may or may not have reverse. Most sleds built now, again, they probably have reverse, but that's something you want to make sure before you go out on it. If you don't have reverse, you will probably want to avoid the small trails that may be dead ends, or, you know, you got to think ahead. If it doesn't have reverse, you're going to be doing a lot of lifting, so something to bear in mind. Is your fuel and oil full? Do you need to carry extra? Do you need to carry extra fuel? If you're going to be going on an extended ride, definitely carry extra fuel. And if it's a 2-stroke machine, you may even want to carry an extra quart of 2-stroke oil. Cooling system, is it air-cooled or liquid-cooled? Again, most sleds nowadays are liquid-cooled, but there's some utility sleds out there still built, and especially a lot of the older sleds are air-cooled. The air-cooled ones are a lot better in low snow conditions and icy conditions because they don't overheat as much. Always have a spare belt and spark plugs and tools. So some of the components on a snowmobile, this is an older picture, unfortunately, but your engine stop switch or kill switch, usually located on the right side of the handlebar. Your throttle bar or throttle lever is much like an ATV. Brake handle is on the left handlebar. Windshield, self-explanatory. Headlight, skis. Your ski springs, front suspension, etc. Slide rails. So this is what we call a skid frame here, and most snowmobiles now have little piece of nylon on the bottom, or UHMW. Those are called sliders or high passes. In low snow conditions or icy conditions, you'll have to equip your sled with what we call scratchers, and they hang out the side. You can unhook them from the skid frame, and they hang out here and scratch the surface of the ice or compact snow. They fling snow up into the track, and that in turn lubricates your sliders, but it also flings snow up into the tunnel area, and that's where your heat exchangers are located. So it helps cool the snowmobile also, cool the engine to avoid engine seizure. Running boards is where your feet go. Snow flap. It's really important to have this intact. Some of the older sleds might have been damaged, it's missing. That stops stuff from flinging up and going in your buddy's eyes.
Also, having a snow flap flings the snow back up into the tunnel and keeps the cooling happening. If it's not on there, then the snow flies out the backside. You don't get as much cooling on your snowmobile.
True. So it'll just fling back. It actually quite often hits the snow flap and flings up there. So again, should have that in there for safety, but also for cooling. If your snowmobile is equipped like a utility machine, quite often it'll be a two-up machine. They usually have handles here or sometimes a strap across the seat for the passenger to hang on. Some of them even have a backrest. And again, one of the requirements by BC Motor Vehicle Act is that it has red reflectors on the back and yellow reflectors somewhere on the front of the machine. And that's pretty useful too at night, even if the sled's parked and it can be visible by other vehicles. So your pre-ride inspection, this is probably one of the most important things in your day. Before you leave your base or your trailer or your deck of your truck, unload your sled and have a good, or if it's just parked at your work site, before you get on it, you want to walk around it and inspect it. So check your oil and fuel levels. Make sure that they're topped up for the day. Inspect visually and manually for loose or damaged parts, running gear, skis, track, suspension, steering and brake components. Check for throttle cable return. That's a really important one. So basically you want to walk around your sled and just have a really good look, especially in that skid frame area that we were talking about. Quite often, if it's been ridden hard, you can break shock mounts or bend suspension components, and that can damage your track and cost a lot of money, but also cause a major breakdown out on the trail. Same with your skis. They can get damaged if it's had a hard impact or something. And on the bottom of your skis, there's metal runners, and they're called wear bars or ski skags. Occasionally, you should lift up the front of the ski and have your buddy have a look at them, make sure they're not too worn. Those help you turn and steer the machine on hard-packed snow and ice. So the throttle return is really important. Before you start that sled, you want to work that throttle a couple of times and make sure that it returns. I've seen it happen before where the sled, someone just starts it up, it's frozen wide open and takes off about 40 miles an hour and it's destroyed. So we're going to see a video up there of something like that. You must have, again, spare spark plugs and a drive belt. That is really important. Should probably carry a tow rope, maybe a little bit of antifreeze, 50-50 mix, just like a little quart bottle. Good thing to have. Toolkit. I usually add a few more tools to the toolkit. The toolkit that comes from the factory with the snowmobile is kind of inadequate. You need a few more tools, maybe a couple of more screwdrivers, crescent wrench, a little bit of mechanics wire, and a multi-tool is pretty handy. seem to be missing a video. Oh, no, it's not. Sorry. Technical difficulty.
Hi, at home from DCSnowmobile.com. Today we're going to be doing a pre-ride inspection on our snowmobile.
Gerard, can you hear that?
No, actually the audio started out and then it quit on us, so you might have to walk us through it.
Sorry. This is me messing it up. I think that if we have it on, there's going to be too much reverb.
Hi, I'm Ron from DCSnowmobile.com. Yeah, again, there's no sound there for us on this end. If you don't, sometimes you can go online for the year model you select and find one. Anyway, so we're going to start just generally looking over our sled, making sure that nothing's broken, everything's functioning properly, the fluid levels are good. If they need to be topped up, we want to top them up before we go for a ride.
Can you hear that?
Yes, we can. It was pretty loud, but yes, it seems to be fine.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it would reverb back on there, so.
It's a little bit, it's cold, it's not great, but it is understandable, so I think we can go ahead with it.
Okay.
The worst thing that can happen, you get over there, you're going to run out of oil and seize your engine, or you run out of coolant. Same thing. It's a sad thing when you get out there and have a problem like that, and you've got 20 miles to walk. If you don't have your buddy with you, which you should have, you're in big trouble. Can sometimes be fatal. So we're going to just generally look over the sled, make sure your skis, nothing's broken or bent. We're going to come down here. We're going to look at the suspension components on the skid frame. So again, we want to check things like our springs, our shocks, things that can bend, shocks, shock mounts. Your sliders here, your high passes, check those for wear. There's little wear marks in them. Again, your owner's manual is going to tell you a lot. Anyway, we're generally just going to check that everything looks in good shape here. On this sled, everything looks good, so we're going to go up top now. Walk around. I'm going to check if I've got a spare belt. You must have a spare belt before you leave. If you don't have a spare belt, then don't go out on your sled. Because if your belt breaks, it's like having a flat tire, but only it's worse because quite often you can't walk home in the deep snow. So in this particular sled, the spare belt is stored here. This one looks to be in very good shape. It's brand new. So, and I know this is for this machine. Each sled manufacturer takes different size belts. So if you've got a couple different brand sleds, you want to make sure that you've got the right one for your sled. Anyway, again, looking under the hood, everything looks good. I'm going to open this side up now. And I just want to make sure that this belt looks fairly good. I can remove the belt cover and have a better look at it. Again, it looks to be in pretty good shape. Things to look for in a belt would be cord hanging or excessive wear marks in it. If you've got that, then replace
Does it have a toolkit? Yes, it's right there. Another thing I like to do, check what's in your toolkit. A lot of times if someone else has used the sled, they might have lost a couple of tools. So just make sure that you've got, okay. I've got a bit of mechanics wire, some electrical tape, emergency starting cord, plug wrench, several open and box end wrenches. I've got an Allen key for tightening some of the components, screwdrivers. So I'll just put these back. Toolkit looks good. And again, I've added a few extra tools to this toolkit because quite often the stock toolkits are inadequate. So we know we've got tools. Good. This side cover. We're going to go around to the back of the sled. Check what else we've got in here. We've got some spare two-stroke oil that's used in this. This is the two-stroke engine, two-cycle engine. So we've got a spare quart of oil. Flashlight. I also carry one of these in my pack and a headlamp. Pair of vice grips and an adjustable wrench. Another roll of tape. And then I've got a couple of pieces of rope. I use this as a tow rope, and this is a bridle on the front. We'll get to that in another video. So I'm fairly well equipped. I carry a lot of safety stuff also in my backpack. So I'm going to replace all this. And then I'm going to come around to this side and open this side cover. So this should be done at the start of every shift. If your sled's been sitting a couple days, someone else has used it, you definitely want to check it. So I want to check the oil. This is a two-stroke engine, so I will be using two-cycle oil, just like we had in the back. Well, I noticed this one is about half full, so I don't want to leave without filling it up. And remove the lid. I like to use good quality synthetic two-stroke oil, or you can use the stock, Skidoo brand of either synthetic or mineral oil. I would recommend synthetic if you're going to get better longevity. So that's just about ready full now, so I'm happy with that. You can see on the side here, level. Replace the cap. It's another thing, this is your coolant. This sled, and most sleds built now are water cooled, same as your car. And they take a 50-50 mix of antifreeze and water. So I see that this one's low. I'm going to remove the cap on the side here. And again, this is just the same kind of antifreeze that you'd use in your car. I've already diluted this to 50-50, so I've dumped half of it out and then filled the rest up with water so that it's 50-50 mix. I know it is. And I fashioned a funnel that fits in there quite well, just out of a water bottle. And again, on this reservoir, there's actually a line on it that says full or low. So I now I'm at the full mark. So I'm good to go with the coolant, good to go with the oil, and I've got my spare oil in the back. It's not very often that you go for a ride and need the spare oil. But if you're going for an extended length of time or like a long ride, you definitely want to carry spare oil, extra oil, and also extra fuel This particular machine, there's a little spot here to carry fuel. It came from the factory with the little container. Other thing we want to check on this particular sled, and most Skidoo sleds have a dipstick here. This is a chain case. And dipstick, just like your car, checking your oil in your car. Now this would take gear oil. I've chosen Bombardier brand, which is the Skidoo manufactured synthetic chain case oil, available at the dealer. So I've got the dipstick, place it, take it out. As you can see, it's right up to the line here. I'm good to go on this. Sometimes I like to double check it. And again, it came up to the same level. We're good to go. On a Polaris, the newer ones usually have a little sight glass right in the side of the chain case, and you'll need probably a flashlight to look at it. And it should be about midway up the sight glass, which would be located approximately in this position here. So anyway, we're good to go. We've got fuel, we've got oil, we're good on our coolant. Some of the other things I'm going to check is does the straw return properly? Very critical. If you trailer this sled or have it on your deck and it's got in rain or inclement weather, quite often a little bit of water can get down into the cable. You try and start it, well the cable doesn't return properly and it's wide open. As soon as it starts up, it's going to take off. So I always like to, before I get on the sled and start it, always check that the throttle returns properly. How do the brakes feel? They feel good? Yeah. So we're ready to start this. This particular machine and most of the newer Skidoos have what they call a DESS. This is an anti-theft device, and it's coded to this snowmobile. My buddy's snowmobile would have the same thing, but it would be coded differently, just like a different key. So I've got a red piece of tape on this because I know it's for this sled. My other sled has got yellow on it. I've got yellow tape on it. So it's just a way to differentiate. So this has to be seated properly. So you put it on kind of like a cap. Normally, you would probably tether this to your body. So if you fall off the sled while you're riding it, it pulls off, and the machine is going to shut down. So I got to make sure that this is seated. And then we're ready to start up. So anyway, we've done our pre-ride inspection. I'm happy with everything. So kill switch up. I would recommend putting the parking brake on. Remember to take it off after you're going to move, because what can happen if the brake gets left on, it'll overheat and probably start your snowmobile on fire, and that'll be the end of it. I've seen this happen several times. Not a pretty sight, and it can be quite costly when you get a machine that's worth thousands of dollars. Anyway, brake's on, this is on. Big rule of thumb is attach this. Most snowmobile clothing will have a little loop for this. So if this does take off, I know it'll shut off, but also make sure that nobody's standing ahead of your sled. So kill switch up on this sled, it's carbureted, and you have to put the choke on. And I'm ready to start. So we're good to go. Done pre-ride inspection, slide's good. If we were going for an extended ride, we would have extra fuel. Thank you for bcsnowmobile.com. Was that boring enough for you? Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to point out to the kill switch up top. I think everyone knows where that is, but the right sled for the job. So depending on what you're doing, you may be using a utility sled or perhaps a mountain sled if you're trying to get into steep areas or, you know, deep snow. Utility sled is usually quite heavy, so you wouldn't be breaking trail with that one. They're more for pack trails or work on roads and stuff, and icy, you know, icier conditions. Used to transport 1 or 2 people, and maybe bringing along your gear, tools, equipment, and for towing a big toboggan or sleigh. Skidoo builds a couple of different ones. A Tundra, which is a smaller machine, really good machine. They build a long track one, which is quite popular. And then they build the Scandic, which is a big behemoth. It's a real beast, real workhorse. It's usually got a 2-speed transmission, reverse. It's a big giant Cadillac. But if you've got to pack heavy gear or tow a big sleigh full of tools and equipment, probably a Scandic. The other one that Yamaha builds is below. It's a Viking, and it's a 4-stroke. All their sleds now are 4-stroke engines, so they're a little heavier, but the engine life is amazing. I've got a couple of Yamahas with over 12,000 kilometers on them, and they're good sled but heavier. Arctic Cat builds a Bearcat, and again, that's a work machine. Or Polaris builds the IQ Wide Track, which again, all these utility ones are more for the work environment. Mountain snowmobile. So if you've got deep snow conditions and you're trying to access some, you know, steeper terrain, quite often companies will have a couple of these, or a Polaris builds their RMK down here. Arctic Cat is the M series, and Yamaha builds the 4-stroke Nitros. And all of these are mountain sleds. Some of the companies buy, you know, 1 or 2 of these for breaking the trail into an area, and then the person with all the tools and stuff brings up the rear a little slower on trails that these guys have broken. So mountain machines are very high horsepower, and they can go up almost vertical terrain with experience. They can be used to tow a small toboggan. My sleds that are mountain machines have hitches on them, and we carry like overnight gear and stuff on them, but nothing heavy. You'll have to get a towing hitch either from the dealer or build one yourself. They're not recommended to transport heavy items because you can bend the trennel back here. And scratchers. Oh, yeah, these are one-person machines also. So they're built for just one person. And if you had an emergency where one sled broke down, then yeah, then you'll have to take 2, but they're built for one person.
Rob, it's Gerard. Can I interrupt with a question? I'm just wondering if the type of riding that I think most of us in the forest industry end up doing is, you know, fairly remote locations, deep snow conditions, can be steep, not really any type of road, well, very limited road riding. And we're also, probably all of us are on a fairly tight budget. Is there 1 or 2 sleds you would recommend that aren't, you know, as expensive as a mountain sled setup that would work in those sorts of conditions?
Yeah, like a Summit is going to be a really expensive machine. They're about $15,000. So yeah, kind of cost prohibitive. The sled, just one section back here, the Skidoo Tundra it looks similar to this. It looks or we'll get to a picture later. But anyway, it's similar to this. You can get the long track version, not as much horsepower as this, but quite a bit. It's probably almost half the price of this one here. So you're looking at about $8,000 compared to about $15,000, so about half the cost. Really good, reliable sled, and that's a Ski-Doo Tundra. And they're actually quite forgiving for riders. They're not super powerful. You can pack a little bit more weight than you could pack on one of these. They usually have a little rack at the back, and yeah, really good sled. So that's probably the one I would recommend. And there is a lot of Ski-Doo dealers in the province, so that is one good thing about Ski-Doo. They've got a really good dealer network, and there's lots of people who are really familiar with Ski-Doo. So they're all the Ski-Doo or all the snowmobile brands out there. They're all good machines. It's people ask me quite often, what's the best snowmobile? Well, Ford, Chevy, Dodge. They're all good, and they all have inherent problems too. So, but probably for that type of work, yeah, I would highly recommend the Tundra Ski-Doo.
Great, thanks a lot.
And I was going to add, on most sleds, if you're going to be riding in low snow or icy conditions, you'll have to add scratchers to your skid frame here, and they're about $50 for a pair. And you basically unhook them, they stick out to the side, and they fling more snow up in the skid frame and tunnel area. One problem with them, you've got to remember to put them back up, hook them back up here before you back up, or most often you'll break them. And like I say, they're about $25 each side, so something to bear in mind. A lot of the sleds now that you buy right from the factory come with them. So what's the number one piece of survival gear? That is your buddy or coworker. Riding alone, either for business or pleasure, not a good idea. So I probably can't overemphasize that. Often when you access locations like snowmobile, rescue is not a quick option, and it's more effective to just facilitate your own rescue. So one person alone can easily get a snowmobile stuck just a few feet off the snowmobile trail and effectively need rescue, even though the snowmobile and the person are both unharmed and in good working order. So in the same scenario with two people, they would have been able to get the snowmobile on the trail again, or at worst case, if the snowmobile wasn't able to be ridden, at least you could double yourself or double your friend out of the situation. And you can't dig yourself out of an avalanche or press one of those spot transceivers if you're unconscious. So again, bring your buddy or coworker. Survival gear. Most people carry some survival gear, the smart ones. So if you're in avalanche terrain, absolutely have an avalanche transceiver, wear it on your body, and also know how to use it, and make sure that your buddy knows how to use their transceiver. In your backpack, you'd want to have a probe and a shovel and know how to use that with your avalanche skills training. Yeah. So if you're going to be in avalanche terrain, you should get some form of training in that. Frozen bodies of water, we went over that a little earlier, but flotation suit, a quick access throwing line is a really good thing to have, and these are available for about $15 at Canadian Tire or any boat store, and it's basically like a little bag about the size of half the size of a lunch bag, and it's got a piece of cord in it that's about 50 feet long, and you can just basically hang on to the one end and swing it around and throw it, and it unravels as it goes. But great for rescue, not only in water, but even if someone's down a bank, at least they got something to grab and help pull themselves up. So a cheap piece of insurance, they're about $15. So your backpack survival gear. This is probably the minimum that you should have if you're going to be out in the field. My backpack, I actually weighed it this morning, and it weighs about 21 pounds. And I've got all this stuff in it, and I actually added about 2 pounds to it just for my lunch. So, like I say, it's about 21 pounds. So avalanche shovel, probe, carry a compass either in your backpack or in your pocket. With a GPS, batteries can go dead. Compass is always going to work. Saw and a knife. Again, like a fold-up saw, you can get at Canadian Tire for about $15. Most people already own a knife, have that in there. Strike anywhere matches in waterproof container. Lighters, again, a couple of big lighters in a Ziploc. And the matches, you cannot have too many. I usually carry about 4 packages in different pockets in Ziplocs, or little film bottles work really well. If you run out of matches out in the bush, again, not a happy day. Some candles, again, you can get those at a hardware store fairly cheap for the emergency candles. Carry about 4 of those. Some duct tape, zap straps, a little bit of that mechanics wire. Again, that's really handy. Space blanket. Again, those are $4 or $5. Have 1 or 2 of those. You can actually build a little shelter with them. It'll help reflect heat from a fire. It'll also keep the rain or snow off of you. Same thing as a space bag. It's the same material, and again, they're about $5. Bivy sack, a little bit heavier. That's your choice if you want to carry that. They're a few pounds, but a large, heavy-duty orange garbage bag. You can buy a whole box of them for about $8. You can use it as shelter and also to signal, like for a helicopter or other people search party. Headlamp and spare batteries. My particular headlamp takes the same batteries as my beacon, so I usually carry several spare batteries. You probably want to carry, if you're working especially, either snowshoes or skis, probably snowshoes. A cell phone, but bear in mind you're probably aware that most places are not going to have cell coverage. A sat phone, kind of cost prohibitive to a lot of people, including myself. I always carry a VHF radio, and on the coast here, I work on towboats in the other part of the year, and I've got a marine VHF, which I know on any mountain on the coast I can get out. If I had a distress call, I could get out to probably some of my friends that work on the boats, or to Emergency Coordination Center. PLB, that's a personal locator beacon, and that's much like they carry on commercial vessels or airplanes. The only difference with these, like a Spot or the new one that's on the market in InReach, we've got a Spot, and it works quite well. So it's got a couple of buttons on it that you can send a check-in message to. You can add 10 of your friends or coworkers to it, so it'll go to their smartphone or to their desktop computer. And let's say you're going to access an area today. You're going to leave this morning. You got all your gear together. You get out there and you encounter some problems, but you're okay. You're not hurt or anything. But you want to let them know that you need some help. You can hit the help button, and you usually program your own message in there, and that'll go to those 10 people. So they'll say, oh, okay, let's see, Gerard is in trouble. He needs help. He's okay. Let's organize a couple of people to go out and see what's wrong. It's also got another button, which is the 911 button, and that's if there's someone's hurt badly, you need help, and you need it now. And that goes to a call center that, like a rescue coordination center, and they coordinate rescue from the nearest, town or rescue center. So they're relatively cheap. A spot is about $150, and to get what I call the full meal deal, that's to have it fully activated. I think it's about, I don't know, $5 a month. It's about $50 or $60 a year. So it's well worth it. And this can be taken anywhere. It can be taken out on your boat, in your kayak, on your bicycle. They're about the size of a cell phone. So really important. Fire starter, as simple as barbecue fire starter. Again, it doesn't cost much. Device and or container to melt snow. There's a picture of one that I carry all the time. It's basically just a tin can with a wire loop in it. Again, dehydration, so you can melt the snow and make some little soup from soup base. Some higher energy food, energy bars, etc. Signal flares, again, those are fairly cheap. We had a situation a few years ago where someone's sled blew up his clutch, and we couldn't tow him out, so he phoned a helicopter. We went up to high ground and phoned. It was just outside of Squamish. Phoned the helicopter flew past us 3 times, and I thought, okay, he's going to think it was a hoax call, so he was just heading back for what we thought was his last pass, and I had one of my small signal flares. I knew the area that we were in wasn't going to be spotted by anyone in a city and freak them out or anything. So I just shot it very low to the snow. That helicopter stopped like he was on a rope and turned and came straight towards us. And we were all wearing bright clothing, but he said he didn't see us. He thought it looked like stumps and stuff. So again, signal flares, fairly reasonable. You can get those at the hardware store or a boating store. Fluorescent surveyor's tape. It's a good idea to have a roll of that on your sled or in your backpack or in your pocket. You can mark, hazards on the trail, or if you were broke down and had to make a shelter, you can kind of put some of that up so that people could spot it. Some light rope, like camping cord, about 30 feet of it. First aid kit, very important. Spare hat, like a tube or something, or a balaclava. Gloves, socks, maybe a fleece jacket, and maybe a spare base layer. Just some extra clothing in there. And again, what I usually do with my clothing, I'll put it in Ziploc bags, just in case you're in really terrible weather, don't want it to get wet. Chemical hand warmers. Carry a few of those in case of an emergency. They can, warm your hands or your feet up. Sunscreen. I've seen some really, really bad sunburn out there. So this is my safety can. It was actually Sari that she invented this, and we've actually had to use one before, and it worked quite well.
So, hey Rob, it's Gerard. Just to let you know, you're kind of fading a little bit with your sound. I'm not sure why, but just so you know.
Okay, that's better. So Sari,
yeah, that's better now.
Okay, Sari invented the safety can. It's basically just I think it was tomato can or something like that, lid cut off of it. Enjoyed the tomatoes and cut a little hole in here and put a loop of wire over it. You can hold that on a stick over a fire, or you could use a candle, but a fire is going to work much better. But it's got some fire starter. This stuff works really well. It's made by Coghlan's. It's called Fire Paste. It's about $4 for a toothpaste tube full, and the fire sticks. Or another easy way to make fire starter is get dryer lint and put it in like egg carton, and then dump some hot wax over it, and makes great fire starter. Some soup base here and here. There's another emergency blanket. This is the big orange garbage bag. You can cut some holes in it and wear it like a poncho if you had to. This is a bunch of matches in an old Sucret's tin, but this isn't waterproof, so I've since, it goes in a Ziploc, but I've since actually added little film containers. They're not easy to find anymore because most are digital. And a couple of energy bars and you can add a few more of these to your pack too. And I like to use try and use these up during the year and replace them. I just dug one out of my pack the other day that I obviously missed, and it was all squashed.
So just so you know, all those items that are there, they all fit inside that can.
Yeah. And all told, that's probably about $12 to build that, and it could save your life if you're way up here. Personal safety gear. So DOT or smell certified helmet. This is a WCB requirement. Also eye protection. So there's a lot of helmets on the market now made in China that say DOT on the back. They must say under the DOT sign, certified, or they're not. They're just DOT. What does that mean? And most of the ones, if it's a $49 helmet, it's probably junk. You got to spend around $100 to get a decent helmet. Goggles, you want like ski goggles that are double layer so they don't fog up. And they can get pretty costly. There's some pretty fancy ones out there, $150 helmets or goggles. If you spend about $40 or $50, you're going to get a pretty good set, or you could go all out and buy the $150 really fancy ones. Take care of them if you buy the good ones. Good quality cold weather apparel. I used to buy ski wear all the time when I rode because it was less money. And each year I'd spend about $125 on a set of ski pants, and they would tear and rip and leak. And a few years ago I finally broke down and spent bigger money. But I'm out there all the time, so I finally decided to buy good stuff. And the thing with the good stuff, it's expensive, but you buy it once. And yeah, you know, if you're doing forestry work, I think there's a few brands on the market that are fairly good and heavy duty that you know would suffice. So pants, jacket, gloves, boots, preferably waterproof and breathable. I think this is really important. Lots of people I've seen over the years, they've got stuff that's waterproof, but it's not breathable, and they're absolutely sweating, overheating, and like they take their jacket off and they're literally just steaming. That's not that good, because if you're sweating that much and then you have a breakdown or stop, then you're going to start getting really cold, and your under clothing is going to be all wet. So dress in layers. Have a balaclava or a toque in your pocket or your backpack. If you take your helmet off, your head's going to get pretty cold pretty fast. And again, you lose a lot of heat through your head. Whistle attached to the jacket. This is something I think is really important. Myself and a lot of my friends now, we've got these attached to our zippers, so when your zipper is done up, if you were pinned or something, you could sort of manipulate that into your mouth without your hands and blow the whistle, and your friends would know where you are. If you were somewhere that you couldn't be seen, you could shout yourself hoarse within 15 minutes. You could blow this whistle all day, and it's a Fox 40 whistle. They're about $5. Something really important you should have. I think most loggers and stuff have a whistle anyway, so you know, for good reason. maybe a spare set of socks, again, back to that hat or toque, some fleece in Ziploc bags. So dress in layers to avoid overheating. Like I said earlier, quite often I get 10 minutes down the trail from the truck and I pull over and I'm tearing one layer off. I'm slowly learning. No cotton. Cotton is absolutely horrible. If it gets wet from either sweat or the weather, it's actually going to be pulling heat out of your body, not keeping heat in. So don't wear any cotton. Even your underwear, if you can wear like a poly blend or something. Wool, millions of sheep, can't be wrong. No loose clothing, especially a scarf. They can get caught in the moving parts and cause serious injury or death. I've heard of cases where people have a scarf on and it dangles down and gets caught in the track and then actually pulls them right into the track and strangles them. Or it could get caught if you've got your hood up and you're looking at your engine, caught in the clutch. So no loose clothing. You can get neck warmers. It's just like a tube that goes over your head, kind of like a toque with a hole in the top. So rider positions. Many of you that have ridden before probably familiar with them. So sitting, it's probably the most comfortable and effective, especially on a utility type snowmobile. So you can lean your body into the turns. Kneeling, it's used on both utility and mountain sleds. Give 1 foot a rest and stuff. You can have 1 foot on the running board, one on your seat. It allows the rider to shift weight in turns and helps to reduce back strain. Standing, that's probably the most effective position, and especially for mountain sled operation, you stand quite a bit because you've got to, use your body language quite a bit to ride them. It allows for quick and efficient shifting of weight in turns and in side hilling, and it allows for the knees to take the shock out of the bumpy trails. Posting, that's when you ride with in the standing position with your knees bent a little bit. Really good in bumpy terrain. So this is the big behemoth Scandic. Really good sled. It's a utility sled. It's a workhorse. Quite often people have the big, huge sleigh behind it or toboggan loaded with tools and equipment. This one's got quite a bit of equipment on it. So this woman here was in one of our courses, and she could ride that thing like you wouldn't believe. Yeah, she did really well on it. A little bit hard to maneuver on uneven terrain. And they're very heavy. This is about a 700-pound or 730-pound sled. Not something you'd probably pick in deep powder conditions. You might want to wait a day or two till it's settled. This one here is the Tundra that I was talking about. It's about a 500-pound sled. A lot lower cost than that Summit that we're going to see in a minute. It's got a long track, a paddle track, really good sled. I think this one is a 550 fan cooled. Really good sled and reasonable price. So this guy's sitting. He's going downhill, so you can see he's got his weight toward the back of the machine and low. And that's kind of the safer way to go down hills. When you go down a hill and you apply your brakes, you never want to lock up your brakes, because as soon as you lock up the brakes, it's going to fill the bottom side of your track with snow in between the lugs here, and that's effectively going to turn your snowmobile into a toboggan, and you'll go out of control, probably turn sideways, and then roll the sled. So what you want to do when you're going downhill is just feather your brake on and off lightly. And the other thing that you can do, especially on a big hill, descending a hill, is put your throttle on and until your clutch engages, and then let the throttle off, and that'll actually use your engine to engine brake a little bit, and then again apply your brakes lightly on and off. As soon as you feel that thing start to lock up and slide a little bit sideways, release the brake, and sometimes you'll even have to get back on the throttle. So something to be aware of, never lock up your track when you're descending a hill. Kneeling. Quite often I ride like this, you get a little tired, and it's just good for, this fella here is turning to the left, so he's got his leg on the left running board, and it's just allowing him to get his body over onto this side and transfer his weight to this running board. This is Tony, a good friend of ours. Standing. So quite often, this is a mountain sled here, and the last one also. This is a guy in a course we did a couple of years ago. We've gone back to this place about 3 years in a row and trained their staff. So he's standing, he's actually posting a little bit. So he's getting ready for some uneven terrain ahead and posting. But again, it allows you to get from side to side quickly to transfer your weight.
And his feet are close to the front of the running boards as opposed to back behind, and it's keeping his center of balance over his hips and knees.
Yeah. Usually when you ride, you want to try and keep your feet forward on the running boards, because that is sort of the center of the machine, as you can see, and that's sort of your pivot point from front to back and side to side. And also they're protected better here from the side. In the background, I'm just going to point this out, the survey tape that I usually carry in my pocket or on the sled. You can see a couple of little sticks here with it on. Where we were doing our training, there was a little water course here. It's really hard to see, and it was actually about 8 feet deep there. So could have been, serious injury if someone drove into it. So before we started out, I just grabbed a couple of branches out of the bush and put some ribbons on it just to alert people. And there was another, just down from this area, about a quarter of a mile, there was a big pile of culverts that the road builders had used, I guess, in the summer, and they were stacked up. When you looked at them end on, you could barely see they were there, and they were right by a corner. So someone could have actually come around the corner and hit them head on and not even hardly known they were there. So we put a bunch of the ribbon up on branches and stuff around them. Just something to bear in mind. If you see a danger, make sure that it's marked and visible for yourself and also for your coworkers or the people coming on shift the next day. Posting. So he's sort of posting here too, but this person here is posting. And again, she's going at a fairly good speed. She's got the scratchers down on the track here because it was kind of icy here. And as you can see, they start flinging up the snow. And again, this in turn goes along your heat exchangers here. The other thing that you can do if your sled's overheating, back here in this area, your heat exchangers run the full length of your tunnel. You can actually chunk out some snow with your boots, like chunk it out, or with your shovel, and then put a couple of big chunks of snow right on the back here, and that'll help. It'll really help cool your sled, especially if you're riding at low speeds. Really important if you've got a water-cooled sled, and like I say, most sleds now are water-cooled. So put a bit of snow back there, and that'll, really improve your cooling. Again, the bent knees to absorb the shock, so it's not so hard on your back. And also when you're standing, both these positions, these people are looking way ahead of them. She's not looking right down in front of her skis, so she's going to see if there's any obstacles or dangers ahead. She can react in a good time. Same with Patrick here. He's looking really far ahead. That's me. So what I'm standing here, but I'm turning to the left, but I'm actually turning to the right. I'm turning my skis, if you can see, just barely. I'm ever so slightly turned to the left, and this is called counter steering. It's really useful in deep snow. Quite often, if you're going to turn this way in deep snow conditions, from angling your ski this way, it's going to want to throw you off the other side. So you actually transfer your weight to this side, and sometimes I'll actually stand both, or quite often stand both feet on this running board, and then I'll angle my skis away just ever so slightly, and then give it some throttle, and it'll just pull around just like it was on a string. Again, with more experience, that's one of the things that you'll learn. So backing up, most sleds nowadays have reverse. Some of the older ones didn't have it. Makes for a lot of lifting and digging. So something I really want to point out to you here, and this is one of the things we teach in our course, whenever you back up, you either sit on the seat or kneel like this fella here is doing, never on the opposite side. And the reason for that is, like, he's on the brake side, and so if he gives a little bit too much throttle and then falls forward, he's not going to fall onto the throttle. And I've seen this happen several times. People back up, they're standing, they're sitting, whatever, but they're off on this side a little bit, on the throttle side. They fall forward, and then all of a sudden the snowmobile's wide open backwards. It turns sideways a bit and usually rolls over top of them and hurts them, or at least gives them a Charlie horse. So super important. He's also looking where he's going, making sure that no one's behind him. There's no obstacle there. And he's going to keep looking throughout that whole maneuver. Reverse doesn't work very good in soft snow. Usually you can only reverse maybe 2 feet. If you're stuck, sometimes you can lift the side of the sled over, back up about a foot, go ahead about 2 feet, back up 4 feet, go ahead about 5 feet. And basically I call it a launching ramp. Instead of digging and getting stuck and then digging again, going ahead, it's a lot better to assess the situation, back up a little bit, go ahead, and make yourself that launching ramp. Sometimes get off the sled, tramp down in front of the sled, about 4 or 5 feet. Make sure that this is solid, like compact it with your boots. Same with the back, come back here, and then back up as far as you can without digging in, and then get on your sled, maybe have a rest, have a drink of your water, and then go forward. So anyway, this is where we conducted the course. There's some just markers, and that's where we were doing the figure eights and whatnot. So techniques to getting unstuck. This has taken years for a lot of people to learn, and myself included. It doesn't matter if you've been sledding for 5 minutes, 5 years, you're going to get stuck. If you're going to ride, you're going to get stuck. It's part of riding. So if your track has trenched a deep hole, you've been riding, and you've got that big 3-foot trench behind you and beside you. Yeah, it's pretty frustrating, especially when it's the 3rd or 4th time in the day, and now you're getting tired. So some of the things that work, get off the sled, again, maybe have a rest, have a drink of water, look around, assess the situation, get your buddy to come and help you, or at least make a plan. So pick a direction that looks the easiest to get out. So if you're heading uphill, you might want to pull the front end around. But anyway, so you want to tamp down beside the sled. So again, get off the sled, and with your feet, just tramp it down a little bit. And same thing behind the sled. Just compact the snow all around the snowmobile. So I'm going to go back to that picture. So you'd want to get off and then tramp that down a bit, tramp down in front. Get your buddy to come over and help lift up the back of the sled. So this next picture, these people, Bruce here got stuck pretty bad. He was almost up to the top of the hill. He's dug in. You pretty much couldn't get unstuck yourself unless you could. But anyway, so what they're doing now, they're making a plan. He's gung-ho to get it done, but they're making the plan instead of just going right into it and pulling their back out or something. So they've talked about it, and these guys have tramped down in front. Andrea here has tramped down at the side, on this side, and Bruce has got that side tramped down. And Andrea's going to wait for help here, but she's ready to go. So Bruce came down. They both picked up the back bumper of the sled, and then because this is all flattened out, they've lifted it up a little bit and then moved it over about a foot. So now the track here is on solid ground or on solid snow. And then a lot of times they'll fill the hole in that was dug by the track and then lift it back. So either way works, but what I usually do is lift it over about half a track width, crush all the snow down into the hole that it's dug, and then we move it back so that the sled's pointing straight again. Another thing that we use quite often is a snow bungee, and it's basically like a glorified bungee cord that you pull, keep under tension, and then the person here gives a little bit of throttle and it leaps right out. But there's enough people here that these two guys are going to pull, and they'll be off to each side out of harm's way, and Bruce is going to be ready to use the throttle here in a minute. So the plan's all done. It's back in position. You can see they moved it over this way, and everyone's smiling, ready to go. Nobody's too exhausted yet. And basically the two guys at the front here would have been pulling, and Bruce would have eased the throttle on and got out. Quite often in a situation like this, you wouldn't be standing on the snowmobile, you'd be beside it. And at the time, he probably would have had his hand over here with two fingers on the brake, ready to use the brake if he had to, if it was going to, get near one of these guys. And the thing with that bungee that we'll see later, it's good because it gets the people out of the way. And successful, they're all happy. You can see nobody's sweating. It was pretty easy. And that's a good thing about riding with a group of people. Many hands make light work. And as you can see, Gregory here has that safety whistle right there. So steep slope, if your sled tips onto its side on a steep slope, loose powder snow, steep angle, if it's soft enough snow and not a big, huge hill, you're safe usually just to roll the sled literally right over, slowly. Do it in stages. If your buddy's there to help you, good. If he's not, it can be done. And you basically, gravity is your friend here. Sometimes you'll clear a spot just below the sled and then slowly just roll it right over. Just one turn right over the handlebars towards the downhill and put it back onto the track. And that is literally in soft snow the easiest way to get unstuck. It's a little easier to demonstrate in the real world, but again, just enough force to get it over. You don't want to give it a big push and see it tumble down the hill and get damaged. So this is what we're doing here. This is Bruce. This is my sled. I just came down to help him. This isn't a very big slope here, but Bruce is down here, and what he's doing here is just tramping down the snow a little bit so that we can roll it easier. And sometimes what I do in situations like this, I'll get my shovel out of my backpack and I'll just dig a little bit where the windshield or handlebars are. In soft snow, it's not going to damage it, but it just makes it easier to actually roll right over. And with a fuel-injected sled like this, it is so easy. With carbureted sled, a little harder because they'll flood and then be a little harder to start. But basically, Bruce is going to get out of the way here, and then I would be pushing on this ski. Bruce would probably push on the track, and we would roll it one revolution, basically back up onto the track. And then he would just get on it, start it up, and drive away. So makes it a lot easier. On hard packed, you wouldn't do this because then you can actually damage components, which I think the next picture. So yeah, compact snow, low angle. This is like not a very steep hill. You would pull the sled back onto the track. Instead of rolling it right over, you would try and pull it back up. And this might take help from your buddy. You don't want the sled to roll over the handlebars if it's compact or icy, because it can damage the kill switch or break your windshield. So this is a picture of Sari. Tipped over. This is part of riding again. This is going to happen. It doesn't hurt the sleds. So I think she was a little embarrassed here. But basically, I took a picture of her and then I helped her. She pulled on the ski and I pushed on the handlebar. We just righted it this way and then she drove away after.
And if there's any ladies out there and you have to turn the sled yourself if you've tipped it over sideways, get out your shovel, dig along where the base of your track and your ski is going to go. Do yourself a bit of a trench on that side that I'm standing.
So right under the ski, you would dig and then along the side of your track, and that'll make it tip over
easier. And then basically go up to your ski and basically put your arms out straight and kind of lean down and use all your body weight to flip the machine back up on end. It's a little bit of work, but it's possible. I'm only 5 feet tall, and I can get that thing turned back up if I do a little bit of digging. So it is possible to do.
So you'd be standing in about this position and arms outstretched and just pull. It's a lot easier, though, if you do have a riding buddy that can push on the handlebar, and then you can laugh about it. But tipping over, again, it's all part of riding. I've got 40 years experience. It happens to me. Lou, he's been riding, I think, since they invented the snowmobile. He's learning. But this was fairly compact snow, and he tried that same move we were talking about earlier. And this is quite hard. Like you can see, he's not even sinking into this. Not such a good idea. That was about in this position here, just above, and yeah, it tumbled down about 4 times, and he was kind of sad. Broke his windshield, and I don't think it damaged anything else, but his pride was a little hurt, but he's smiling. So on compact snow, you wouldn't want to flip it over if it's stuck. You just want to pull the front end around, and we'll try and get to that in a bit. So sled tow to get you unstuck. It's the least physically demanding technique to get unstuck. You use another snowmobile to pull you out of the hole, and it can save time and definitely save energy. It only works on more consolidated snow, although if it is powder conditions, you can get your buddy, we've got a video ahead that's going to demonstrate it, but you'll see that person drive by the sled 3 or 4 times first to pack down the snow, and then they hook up the rope or the snow bungee, and then they pull them out. It works really good, especially if it's only 2 of you. Saves a lot of hard work, digging and lifting and stuff. So, you know, it works really well. It can't be used on a really steep hill because you'll just get both sleds stuck then. And also, another thing to be aware of, on a steep slope, not a good idea to have 2 people or 2 sleds on it, because the weight of an additional sled or a person may cause an avalanche if the snow is unstable.
1 person on the slope at a time.
Yeah. Oops. So this is a demo, a little video of these guys that are stuck. I might stop the video during and narrate it a bit. technical difficulties. There it is. So that person is really stuck. And this is probably near the end of a day where, you know, everyone's tired and they just want to go home. Buddy went for his last little ride and got stuck. So you're going to see this fella come around again. And they're making a plan. He's trying to consolidate the snow in here.
And you can see those guys have what's called snow bungees.
Yeah, these things are carrying, they're about $100 a piece, or you can build one yourself out of about 3 bungee cords bundled together and put a hook on one end and a engine starting handle on the other. They're amazing. They work so well. So quite often you can just grab one with it and lean back and it'll just leap right out of there without even a sled towing it. You're going to see this guy here walk out of the way, so he's out of harm's way. He put his goggles back on because quite often it'll fling stuff up. So it can be just that easy. Those snow bungees or a rope, big time saver and really, you know, saves a workload and, you know, possibly avoid back strain or, you know, an injury like that, especially at the end of the day when you're tired. So turning a sled with no reverse, any of you that have ridden a sled with no reverse, it's not that much fun. So reverse, most sleds nowadays are built with it. So if you're on a narrow trail, you can pretty much spin a sled around almost in its own length by yourself and your buddy. Again, sometimes you got to, in deeper snow, you got to tramp down around the track, but you lift the track up, or the track end of it, the back end, just a little bit, and then usually on the count of 3, you and your buddy will be there. You'll 1, 2, 3, lift, over. 1, 2, 3, lift, over. 1, 2, 3, lift, over. And then you might come around to the front side and grab onto the ski and just pull it over sideways. And again, if your buddy's there, 1, 2, 3, over. 1, 2, 3, over. And that way you're not lifting so much. You're just lifting a tiny bit and dragging it. And you can pretty much spin 180 degrees. If it's deep snow, it's a little more challenging, and you might have to walk around a bit and just tramp down the snow. If you're on a narrow road, wider than a trail, say it's a narrow road, the ski hold method works really good, and this especially if there's only 2 of you out. So have your buddy grab onto your ski, stand at the side of your sled, and grab onto your ski on the inside on the way that you want to turn, and almost just hold on to it while you turn, and just feather the throttle lightly, and your buddy's still holding onto the ski, almost holding it stationary kind of, and just rotating, and it's just enough resistance that the sled will just turn right around, and it'll decrease the turning radius, and again, it's almost to the length of the sled. That's how effective it is. And there's a picture of myself and Sari using this method. So I came up this little rise here, and there was a tree that I didn't want to run over, so I didn't really want to back up. If I backed up down here, then when I went to go ahead, I would immediately dig a big hole and I'd be stuck and not liking life very much. So anyway, Sarah came over and helped me. She just grabbed onto my ski here, and she sort of planted her foot, and then I slowly just feathered the throttle on and off. Notice that I've got 2 fingers ready on the brake in case I was getting near her or the tree. And then feather that throttle a little bit. As I turn, Sarah will pivot, and again, we could almost turn right around here in the length. But anyway, I just got clear of the tree, and then she let go, and I continued on, and thanked her very much. So snowmobiling is challenging because the snow is ever changing, and any of you that have ridden can attest to this. Quite often you go out in the morning, the snow is rock hard, the windshield on your car or truck is frozen, and not very much fun. It's cold. You get out there, and you're riding along, it's icy. Then by about 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe it's warmed up a little bit, and now you can steer better, and your sled is just a little easier. Well, then around noon, maybe it's warmed up a lot, and now it's getting a bit slushy and heavy, and if you get stuck, it's a lot more work. So basically, snow is always changing 24/7. So it changes from one day to the next due to the weather. It changes daily with changes in temperature from the morning, afternoon, evening, and night. So, you know, when you get back to the truck in the evening or late afternoon, it's already starting to freeze again. And then overnight, it freezes rock hard, or maybe you get a big dump of snow overnight. So it's always different. Every day on the snow is it's a different ballgame. So changes in elevation. So where you guys offload your sleds off the trailer or truck, maybe you've got a bunch of rocky patches and snow. You get up I don't know, 500 meters, and all of a sudden you're into way deeper snow, and then another couple hundred meters, and you're into deep, deep powder. So be prepared for that with, you know, the equipment that you bring, maybe even the sleds that you choose to take that day. It can change. Even you can be riding down the trail, and it's hard path. Oh, we've been here 3 or 4 times in the last week. And then all of a sudden, one of you drives off the trail into the loose snow, and all of a sudden you're up to your waist and stuck. So something to be aware of. Snow conditions and ride technique. So different snow conditions require different riding techniques. Applying a compact snow technique to powder snow conditions will lead to getting stuck and a lot of digging. Can be exhausting some days. We get new riders out with us, and you know, just like I used to ride when I was a kid, learning, it takes time to learn. There's a picture of me a few years ago. I got off this trail that we had been up a few times, and this was all the fresh stuff. But I got down there, I thought, oh, I can get back on, and anyway, I got to there and dug a big hole. So anyway, Kevin, as you see here, I don't know if you can see it, but he's got a snow bungee here. He religiously carries that, and it's come in handy quite often. There's my shovel, handy item, my backpack, my helmet. So riding in deep powder. To effectively ride in the powder, you need a snowmobile designed for deep snow. Mountain sled is necessary. Or, again, that Tundra is pretty good for deep snow because it's not a super heavy snow, but they do have the long track versions, and they're a real good low-cost sled, very reliable. And you must know how to use the sled or how to make it perform. So an experienced powder rider can make a non-powder machine work with a lot of effort. but an untrained person cannot make a powder machine work in powder conditions. It's really frustrating if you took a sled out and let's say they bought you the real nice Summit and you've never ridden in powder. It's a real big learning curve. If you can go with experienced riders or even watch, I suggest watching videos on YouTube is a really good, you won't think that you're going to learn much from that, but a lot of that sinks in and you'll find yourself doing the same type of riding or you know, you'll learn from it. They need to know the specific techniques and be proficient. So again, YouTube is a good resource, or local snowmobile club, or just with try and ride with riders that have more skill than yourself. You'll learn lots. So powder turn from a standing position. So you'd want to turn, get on your sled in a standing position. You can either stand with both legs on the running board on the side that you're going to be turning to. Angle the skis away from the way that you want to turn, but just slightly, maybe about 4 inches at the front, if that. That's called counter steering. Shift your weight to the way that you want to turn and apply the throttle. And again, you're going to feather the throttle a bit, but give it a significant amount of throttle. In powder, usually the worst thing that can happen, you'll flop over on your side and you'll be fine. If you can, try and get away from the sled so that it doesn't fall on you. But again, usually in powder, it's not too big of a deal. So angle your skis away from your turn slightly, shift your weight to the way you want to turn, and then apply the throttle. And your sled will just peel right around. It'll take a few times to practice, but it works really well.
And it has to be done in that order.
Yeah. So your weight shift, have your skis angled a bit, or angle them as soon as you, basically it's all done in that order, like Sari says. So angle your skis away a bit, shift your weight, apply throttle, and it's almost a fluid movement of all that. So this is what I'm doing here. So right foot forward, and if I was on the other side, left foot would be forward. And this isn't as soft a powder. It is a bit, but it's not as soft as usual. But as you can see, it is coming around this way. It works great. It's easy maneuver. It does take a bit of practice. Practice it at low speed. You don't have to be going 20 miles an hour to do this. And you can practice on a little bit harder snow. I wouldn't recommend it on hard pack, but if it's a bit soft, it'll dig in a bit, and you'll get the feel of it. And then, you know, just as your skill improves, then use it more and more. So side hilling. This is a fairly advanced maneuver, and I wouldn't recommend this unless you've ridden quite a bit and seen it done, maybe had a little bit of tutelage from someone that knows what they're doing. So again, it works just similar to what that last picture was, that you're standing on the running board, both feet on the uphill side, angle your skis slightly away from the hill, that's counter steering, shift your weight down onto that upper running board and apply the throttle. So it's almost like that turn, but as soon as it flips up onto the side, it's almost like a cookie cutter. It'll go across the slope, and you'll just have to finesse your skis back and forth ever so slightly and play with your throttle a little bit. And again, start on something that's very low angle and practice, and then as you improve, then you can try a little bit steeper hill. But it's very useful if you're trying to access areas that have a little bit of off-camber trails and stuff. And other thing to remember, this is very, very important, keep the throttle on throughout the side hill. As soon as you let off that throttle or apply your brake, it gravity will take over. It'll throw you over top of that sled and it'll basically, your sled's going to want to roll down the hill. So it is a kind of a dangerous maneuver. So like I say, you probably want to get someone that knows what they're doing to help teach you. Or if you've got any doubts about it, don't try it. So this is a demonstration of it. This is a friend of mine. He started out over here. So let's say this was a road and the snow had drifted in a bit. So basically, he's on the uphill side, right foot forward, left foot back. He's probably got his 2 fingers ready for the brake, although you wouldn't want to apply the brake here. But he's got the track spinning fast enough that it's actually spinning a little bit, so it cuts in. He's counter-steered. I don't know if you can see that a little bit, but he's steered this way a little bit. And what that does, it allows the sled to lean over to that side. If he tried to turn up the hill, that's going to force the sled over this way. It's simple physics. So he keeps it angled away, and with finessing the steering just a little bit and using that throttle, just feathering it on and off a bit, you can side hill around the world. So it works really well, but it does take practice.
And as soon as you take your hand off of the throttle,
You're
the momentum of the track pulling you forward is no longer there, and the snowmobile will flop onto both of the skis. You will then be sideways on the hill, and the snowmobile will roll over, and down the hill you will go.
Yeah.
So if you're going to try that, you have to be committed. You have to keep your throttle on.
Yeah. And if you find yourself in that situation, if you, partway through the maneuver, if it does happen, jump off on the high side. They build snowmobiles every day. They can be replaced. Quite often, especially in powder, it's not going to get damaged. And that's why if you're doing this, do it on very low angle first. You can even do it on the flat. So anyway, what happens quite often, people will get scared. They'll either apply the brake or reduce the throttle, and this will flop down. It'll fling them down here, and then the sled will roll over top of them. And if it's powder snow, quite often they're uninjured, but it could cause extensive injuries, serious injuries. So common injuries, leg injuries, and this just isn't for side hilling. Always keep your legs or feet on the running boards unless you're going from side to side. So leg injuries are quite common. Chest injuries, if you hit handlebars or are thrown. Back injuries, going over an embankment or lifting. So feet on the running boards at all times, unless you're altering your riding style, like from kneeling to sitting or from side to side of the machine, but never put your feet out. Tracks turning at high speed. A friend of mine a few years ago, pretty horrible accident. His foot slipped off. His track was turning very high speed. His toe got caught on one of the lugs, and it instantly, he had a spiral fracture on his femur. He had to be helicoptered out. So you can get some pretty serious injuries by putting your feet out. So again, always be aware of that. If the sled's going to tip over on its side, they're built for that. It's not going to hurt them. And again, even if it did hurt the sled, it can be repaired. It's usually very minor damage if it was on icy conditions. But if you put your leg out or your arm, it's not going to stop it from tipping over. They're 500 pounds. Your knee joint cannot withstand the force of 600 pounds applied to it sideways. Not going to be good. So don't put your feet out. Let it tip over and tip it back up. So broken ribs or bruised ribs, another fairly common injury. Sudden stops. If you see bumps in the snow, it could be a rock, it could be a gate post, piece of logging equipment. If you don't know what it is, go around it, or hitting trees, whatever. Rib cage impacts on the handlebars, not good. Some people wear chest protectors. I do if I'm going to do some extreme riding. I wear it. Sari wears a chest protector all the time. Some of my friends do, and it can save you. If you're just low speed, it's up to you, but it's recommended. Don't ride beyond your ability. If you're not confident doing something, do not do it. And also don't ride above your snowmobile's ability. You wouldn't take that big, huge Scandic up really steep hills. They're not built for that. And same thing, you wouldn't load down the mountain sled with 400 pounds of gear. So again, use safety for yourself and your sled. Slow down at night and also in low visibility conditions like fog or inclement weather. If you can't see it, don't go or slow right down. Sometimes you're going to have to get off your sled and see what's ahead. Spinal injuries, riding over embankments. I've seen some pretty horrible accidents this way over the years. Cliffs, crush injuries by snowmobile. If you ride over an embankment, your snowmobile lands on you, or you roll down a hill. You got to think about things before you do them, using safety. Fall off your sled deck. This happened to me personally 2 years ago. I was teaching a course. I went to start one of the sleds. The starter disengaged and I went flying off backwards. I was, however, wearing my protective gear, helmet, etc. I was lucky I landed on my side, but I did hit my head pretty hard. If I wasn't wearing a helmet, I think I would have had serious injury. And so I got up, I was okay, and I said to the students, I said, it can happen anytime, and it's actually quite a common, loading and unloading can be dangerous. Head trauma, sudden stops, they hurt. No helmet, bad idea. So loading and unloading, another one, that the ramp is not secured properly. I've seen some very, very bad accidents this way. People come riding to go up their ramp. It wasn't secured. It flipped back. The guy didn't have a helmet on. It almost literally ripped his whole nose off. It was hanging, blood everywhere. Bad injury. So always make sure that your ramp is secured properly, either by a tie down, or most commercially built ramps have like a hook on the front that positively, but check that it's in properly, that it's seated properly. Not wearing your protective gear. I see so much of this, especially out in the staging areas where people are loading and unloading. Oh, we're not even riding yet. Nothing's going to happen. That's where the majority of the injuries happen. A lot of the ramps that I see people use are too steep, and they require too much speed, and again, in turn, that causes more problems. Then I've seen this, the sled goes up the ramp, comes off the ramp, or it goes right over top of the ramp and lands on the pickup cab or in the back window. It's hard to explain that. So sled decks can be slippery, as I can attest to that, and they're most of the time fairly narrow. You can fall off them. So here's a video, and this one, the guy's not wearing a helmet. Not a good idea, but a simple accident can become pretty major. Probably the end of the day here.
Oh! Oh my God, that hurts so bad. You can take my sled. No. Oh, that's like my guts are falling out. Take your coat off. You gotta make sure your throat's like. I'm not. It's just like right here.
So as you can see, the guy wasn't going very fast, but he's probably got cracked ribs, and that'll be painful for months. Just a simple mistake like that. Had he had a chest protector, might have protected him, but yeah, you got to be careful out there. Wear your protective gear. He should have had a helmet on for starters. Keep 2 fingers over the brake. Not that that would have helped him in that situation, but at least ready to use if you need it. Get a smooth, easy speed, which he did have. Keep your momentum up going before hitting the ramp. So get enough speed that it's going to sort of carry you up that ramp, and then feather the throttle as you climb the ramp. And another thing, you don't want to be hitting that ramp at 15 miles an hour and go right off the top of it. Once you're up, set the parking brake, and in the end, you're going to have to secure your sled to the deck or the trailer by the 4-point system, and it should be tied both left and right on the front and the back from going backwards or forwards. And I usually like to have the parking brake set too. There is things on the market called super clamps, and they're pretty handy. They work really well. But make sure it's tied down. You can get fines from the vehicle inspectors or police if they pull you over and it's not tied down properly. Now they actually have to be the tie downs that you have, they're marked with how much load they can take. So make sure it's tied down properly. The more tie downs, the better.
If you're in an accident, you do not want your snowmobile to come through your rear window and take your head off.
Yeah, or if it comes off on the highway, you're responsible for damages, plus your sled's probably toast. So this guy here does a really good job of loading, except he's not wearing a helmet, but he's very careful, and you're going to see him walk up and actually check that his ramp is secured. So I'm actually pretty impressed with this guy. But I don't like his ramp. It's too short for the, it's a short box. And, So, yeah, that guy did quite a good job. Didn't go up there too fast. He got just to the top, feathered the throttle a little bit just to get over the top. And as we all saw, he went and double-checked that his ramp was secured. And he was far enough away that he could get enough speed that he didn't have to gun it at the last second. That's another common thing. People get partway up the ramp, they're not going fast enough, and then they spin, and all of a sudden it gets traction and the sled goes flying into the rear window of the pickup or right off the front of the sled, and then the person hopefully is not injured. But, so common pitfalls. Workers and recreationalists fail to use SIFTI, so they're not looking ahead and making an assessment of what's ahead of them. I've seen this time and time again, and some very serious accidents. riding over a rise without knowing what's on the other side. Basically, they're in some terrain and they're assuming that it's similar to what they've ridden. It's a nightmare. If you can't see where you're going, then do not proceed. And sometimes you'll actually have to get off your sled, walk ahead, and look over, and oh my God, there's a drop-off. Or, you know, maybe your buddy gets partway up there and he checks it out and makes sure the rest of the people that are coming do it safely. So as we can see this terrain back here, you should probably think that it's going to be similar terrain on the next hill. This is a right-of-way. Anyway, looks like a nice day, sunny, bit of powder snow. So I think we'll put that on again. This is probably one of the most serious types of accidents, and it is quite common where people come over a bit of a rise and all of a sudden there's nothing in front of them. And to reinforce it, I just want you to watch it again. So I bet you his drawers are loaded there. One of the things, this guy is really lucky here. This terrain feature here, although it probably hurt him, it totaled his sled. But the wind was coming from this way, and that probably saved his life, because what it's done here, this is called the fetch, where the wind picks up the powder snow, and then it deposits over here what they call the catch. So this whole area in here was powder snow, and you can see it's quite deep. That probably saved his life. Even though his sled got totaled, he walked away from this. And had it not been for the weather conditions and everything, he probably would have been, I would say, probably paralyzed or killed. So never assume it's safe unless you can see it.
So his friends are sitting at the top there, so he made an assumption that you could go over the other side without knowing.
And his friends probably stopped for a reason, and they probably tried to warn him, but a little bit too late.
When you assume, it makes an ass out of me and you.
So roadway watercourses, this is something we all deal with, and especially if you're working on sleds, I think it's important. So they offer two challenges. They can cause accidents because they're not easy to see until the last second. So again, don't overdrive what you can see, and they're quite often kind of hidden. And also, riders get stuck trying to cross them. That's not quite as serious, but again, if you get stuck several times, it's exhausting. So this is a fellow that I know. He was wearing a helmet. He's smiling because he wasn't going that fast, but it came up, like he said, all of a sudden it was there. He nose-dived into it. He went over the handlebars. He was okay. Took a few minutes to get his sled out. But could you imagine if the snow was another 4 feet deeper, like it usually is at this time of year that this happened? He probably would have been hurt. So, really hard to see. So if you've got to cross a place like that, usually they're deeper. Sometimes there's more gravel exposed. The way that you want to cross them. So to ride through one of them and get to the other side, you must have enough momentum going down the hill into the trench to get your skis to start up the other side, and also enough momentum to sort of carry you up the other side a little bit, and then feather the throttle to keep your momentum up. Don't stop at the bottom when your skis just start to point up, and then you're just going to spin on the gravel, and it can throw a bunch of rocks at your buddy and also damage your sled. So you want to keep enough speed going down into the gully to sort of get you started up the other side, and then again just feather that throttle a little bit to carry you through. And it's going to take practice. Sometimes what we do, we come to these and we'll actually get off the sleds and we'll fill a bit of snow into it, or we'll smooth out the other side so that it's a ramp instead of a really sharp drop-off. And sometimes you just got to turn around and go home, or find a different route around it. But again, they can cause accidents. So this is a similar one. Not quite enough to get up the other side, but rather than try and get out there by yourself, if you got your buddy, these are those snow bungees, really handy to have. So each of us got on, put into the little ski hoops at the front of the skis, and then this fellow's son got on the sled, feathered the throttle as we pulled, and basically you just walk this way with your goggles on, because if this thing flings back, it could actually hit you in the face. Not very likely, but it could happen. So I've got a face shield here that flips down on that helmet. So you walk backwards a couple of steps, plant your feet, and then just lean back, and that puts tension on the snow bungee, and then it's almost like this thing is air-powered. It just whoop right out. They work really well. So mechanical malfunctions. A belt change, it's really important that people know how to do a belt change. That's like being able to change your tire on your car. A little bit more serious, because quite often out where you're going to be, you can't walk home. So in your owner's manual, it'll tell you the procedure. On YouTube, quite often you can find videos for this. Spark plug replacement, most people are familiar with this, but again, refer to your owner's manual, go online. DESS, not connected properly. So on the Skidoo brand of snowmobiles, Bombardier, they had that little DESS plug I was telling you about. If this thing's not seated properly, the engine will rev up, but it won't move. Most of the time, you just have to grab this thing and reconnect it, and then the sled will let out 2 beeps, and then you're good to go. If it keeps just going beep, 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 and it won't rev up, that's the problem. And this is a really common thing, people that own Skidoos, if you don't know about that. You can spend hours changing spark plugs, looking, and that's all it was. Today we're going to be doing a belt change on 06 Skidoo 800 Summit. Anyway, if you're not familiar with them, get your owner's manual, consult it. It'll tell you how to change your belt and several other maintenance items. So always look at that first. We're going to start off by opening up the sled on the left-hand side. Most snowmobiles manufactured belt is going to be on the left-hand side. And on this particular sled, the toolkit is located on the left-hand side also, here. On this toolkit and most of my other sleds, I've actually added a few more wrenches, some mechanics wire, some electrical tape, just a few extra tools to have. So this is a belt guard. We're going to have to remove this to get to the belt. that side. So this is the primary clutch. This is your secondary clutch. Both Skidoo and Flare made a little tool to help with make it a little easier. So that's what this one looks like. A little swivel on it. And on the secondary clutch, you'll find an arrow somewhere around right here. That's pointing to a hole that this threads into. So take that tool and just thread it into there. It should go in there really easily, and you should be able to turn it just with one finger. If you've got to force it, you've probably got it cross-threaded, so you want to take it out and reinsert it. Right? So now I'm getting a little bit of resistance, and I can actually use my full hand to turn it. What this is doing, this is spreading the two paths of the pulleys apart, and that's going to loosen the belt so that they can remove it. We're going to continue with that. Usually we turn them in to about 3/4 of the way. I like to use disposable gloves because already my hands are a little dirty. So it just saves some cleanup later. And you don't want to put dirty hands into your $80 gloves, riding gloves. Turn this a little more. As you can see, the belt getting loose. Again, look at your owner's manual because the Yamaha is going to be different, and also an Arctic Cat has a different tool. So you're going to have to check that before you're out on the trail. So that's been about 3/4 of the way. Now let's get loose. And you just grab that and slide it over top of the pulley. Pull that aside. And the old belt is out. So I've got another belt handy here. And this one's actually damaged. As you can see, it's got a cord hanging out of it. So as they wear, it gets worn down, and then the cords will start coming out. So this one's ready to throw in the garbage. It's good for demonstration purposes. Sometimes you'll be riding, you'll hear a tick, 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 tick. Shut the machine down, have a look at it. If that starts happening, it's time to replace. If you leave it too long, it'll literally explode, and you'll have little bits of string all wrapped around your clutch. It'll make a big mess and make it a lot harder to do your change and clean up. And sometimes these can get wound up in your clutch and stop it functioning properly. So anyway, before that happens, quite often I'll change my belt before it needs done. If I see any wear, I replace it. Other thing, before you leave on your ride, do you have a spare belt? That you should always make sure. I know this particular machine's got one stored up in the front of it. I've already checked that earlier. Lift the lid. On this machine, it's stored up here. So I've got another brand new one handy. This one here has arrows on it. If your belt has arrows, face them forward when you're putting the belt on. If there's no arrows on it, it just has writing, then when you put the belt on, make sure that you can read the writing. If it's upside down, you can't read the writing properly, then you've got to rotate it this way. So we're going to put this on. So put it on the primary clutch first, and then just ease it over the secondary clutch. On there, and then back off very slowly. Careful with your fingers, this thing can't hinge. And again, just rotate it out with your fingers. So when you get it out, put that back in your toolkit. You don't want to lose that tool. And what I like to do is, if I'm out on the snow especially, I'll get my buddy to pull on the back of the sled, pull it backwards, and I'll just rotate it backwards a little bit. And then I'll get my buddy come around the front of the machine and pull backwards. Rotate it a little bit. And let's go back a little bit more. What that does, it reseats the belt in the proper position. You don't have to do that, but it really helps, and it'll extend the life of your belt. Also, when you replace the belt, take it easy on the sled for about 10 minutes. No full throttle riding. And what that does is it seats the belt, works it in, and just breaks it in easily. Worst thing you can do for a belt is replace it, be on the throttle full bore, because the belt is going to shorten its life a lot. So anyway, we're all done. So we're going to replace our tools into our toolkit. So basically, I just put the.
Hi, Rob. It's George. Just sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that we are running out of time.
Yeah.
One reason is because I have to actually leave the building here shortly. But so if I could ask you to just wrap things up, if you could, within the next 5 minutes, please. And if there's any information or other videos that we haven't seen yet, we can make those available to the people
Yeah.
that are into the webinar. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're just about done, and yeah, there's 2 more slides. So basically, if you tow a broken snowmobile, which is one of the things you guys wanted to cover, you'd want to remove the belt from the broke down one, just like we just did. We would remove it with, if you've got a Skidoo or Polaris, it's got that same sort of tool. Take that belt off and stow it somewhere. And then if it's one person, I won't get into this one too much because that's not going to happen very often, but you basically take the ski hoop of the broken down sled and tie it to the back end very, very short, like right up against the bumper, and wrap it up. And then it acts just like a puppy dog following you. But there's no, it's right against the back bumper on the ski. It's kind of hard to explain. And 2-person tow, you'd attach the tow rope to both ski posts, not to those ski hoops at the front. They'll just tow in the skis and possibly break them, but also then the person will have no steering. So basically the ski posts or the A-arms, and then usually you attach the rope to one side of the rear bumper. If you attach it to the middle of the bumper on the towing sled, it can bend them. And then you put a rider on both machines. Make sure the rider on the rear machine has goggles on because it can fling up a lot of snow and ice. And then the sled that's broken down, that rider steers. I think I'll just let this go for a second here. Just to decide that so make sure don't tie it to a bumper. One of the other ones I've seen used a number of times. Make sure this is not what you're doing. One of the other ones I've seen used, the person driving is like, so don't tie it to the front bumper. It'll just probably break that bumper off. And don't do what he's doing here. He's just demonstrating what not to do. It pulls the skis together. This person's going to have no steering. You want to tie it to the ski posts here or to the A-arms here. I would recommend the ski posts. They're strong, and then this person on this sled is still going to be able to maneuver, like steer and stuff. So we'll try and speed it up. So that's pretty much it. It's our hope that by presenting these responsible viewpoints on safety, we will expose workers and the general public to proper and prudent snowmobile safe snowmobile operation. We're here to assist your learning. We cannot guarantee it, only you can. So always choose to reduce the risk and know your abilities. Don't ride above your head. So anyway, thanks so much. Sorry that it took a little longer than I thought, but
no problem. I just want to say a big thank you to Rob and Sari for the presentation for the webinar this afternoon. Tons of really good information, and a big thank you to all those that participated today. If you've got any questions or comments about the presentation, I put up my email and the phone number here for the toll-free number for the council up on the chat function, so feel free to contact me. And again, thank you very much for participating. And that ends the webinar for today.
Well, thank you. And if anyone's got questions, feel free to phone. You know, I can talk you through some other stuff too. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. And we'd like some feedback too. We're going to try and improve. This is our first webinar ever, so we're kind of excited about it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Sorry for keeping you so late.
No worries. So, Rob and Sari, I'll give you a quick call just offline for a couple minutes, if you don't mind.
Okay, and thanks again,